Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some malicious compliance stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who felt entitled to things that weren't theirs. A London flat, a pregnant woman's spotlight, and control over neighbors who weren't even in their club. One involves a cousin who treated his Zone 2 flat like a free hotel and left with half-eaten muffins. Another a sister who demanded a cancer patient drink to prove she wasn't pregnant. And the last, an HOA that rejected membership dues but still wanted to enforce rules. Here we go. My cousin treated my London flat like a free hotel for years. I live in London, which apparently makes me a walking hotel in the eyes of certain relatives. Specifically, my cousin seemed to believe that owning a one-bedroom flat within Zone 2 means I exist to provide complimentary accommodation whenever they fancy a city break. For years, I went along with it. Before my fiancé moved in, I'd pack a small bag and spend the weekend at his place while my cousin and whoever she brought with her stayed in my flat. At the time, it didn't feel like the end of the world. We enjoyed the excuse to spend uninterrupted weekends together at his place, but he always said, "You know, you don't have to do this, right?" I'd shrug it off and say it was easier than arguing. In hindsight, easier was debatable. The last visit before he officially moved in was my cousin and her 15-year-old son. I picked them up from the station, brought them back to my flat, and that first night I ordered takeaway for all of us. It wasn't cheap, but I figured it was a welcoming gesture. There was no real thank you, just an assumption that dinner appearing on the table was standard procedure. The next morning I opened the fridge and noticed that more than half the leftovers were gone. I ate what remained for lunch, thinking nothing of it. My cousin shot me a look like I'd committed a crime. "I was planning to have that for lunch," she hissed as though I'd raided her personal stash. I blinked at her. It was last night's takeaway that I paid for. She didn't respond, just gave me that tight-lipped expression people use when they think you've wronged them but can't articulate why. I brushed it off, but the mood lingered. It felt strange to be tiptoeing around food in my own home. On their last night, we went out for dinner. When the bill arrived, I slid it gently toward her, fully prepared to split it or at least see if she'd offer to cover it as a thank you for the accommodation and prior meals. Instead, out came the iPhone calculator. She carefully itemized exactly what she and her son had eaten and paid only that portion. I was left covering my meal, her shortfall from rounding, and the entire service charge. I should have said something then. Instead, I paid and smiled. Before they arrived, I'd stocked up on groceries thinking I could use whatever was left the following week. When they left, I noticed bags of food missing, half-eaten packets of crisps, bananas, an open box of cereal, half a bottle of milk, cookies with 2 inside, even muffins I'd planned to have for breakfast. They'd taken everything with them as though my kitchen were a complimentary snack bar. When my fiancé officially moved in, I thought the free accommodation era might quietly end. A one-bedroom flat with 2 adults doesn't exactly scream spare capacity. Not long after, my cousin messaged asking to stay again. I explained politely that we didn't have the space, and since we both lived here now, we couldn't just relocate for the weekend. She immediately proposed a solution. "I can sleep on the sofa," she wrote. "We can move your furniture to make space for an airbed for my son." Move my furniture in my own flat so she could visit London for free? Before I could even respond, my fiancé replied with a list of nearby hotels. Just a clean, efficient set of links and names. No apology, no long explanation. I stared at the message and felt both relieved and slightly envious of his spine. That's the difference. He didn't negotiate, he didn't explain, he just sent hotel links. No guilt, no drama, just a quiet wall she couldn't climb over. A few months later, my sister visited. Her Airbnb fell through at the last minute, and she called me stressed and nearly in tears. I, of course, offered her the sofa for the weekend. She's thoughtful, considerate, and genuinely appreciative. She brought pastries for breakfast, insisted on paying for brunch one morning, and when she left, she'd arranged a small bouquet of flowers in a vase with a handwritten thank you card on the table. It was night and day compared to my cousin's visits. A few days after my sister left, my cousin messaged again, "Since you let your sister stay, can we come next month?" My fiancé responded before I had a chance to overthink it. The same list of hotels appeared in the chat. She replied almost immediately, suggesting that perhaps she could come alone this time and leave her son at home. Just me on the sofa, she wrote, as if reducing the head count made it more reasonable. My fiancé sent the same hotel list again. There was something beautifully consistent about it. No debate, no justifications, no guilt-tripping counter-arguments, just here are your options. I sometimes wish I had his level of firmness from the beginning. Instead of slowly growing resentful over leftovers and service charges, I could have simply said no. It's funny how quickly family helping family turns into family exploiting convenience. I don't mind hosting people who respect my space. I mind feeling like an unpaid concierge in my own home. London may be expensive, but my sofa isn't a public resource. If you want a city getaway, there are plenty of hotels within walking distance. Just don't expect me to vacate my own bedroom so you can take my cereal on the way out. That's the real lesson. Hosting should feel like connection, not extraction. Your sister brought flowers and gratitude. Your cousin brought a calculator and an empty suitcase. One is family. The other's just using the word. And our second story. My sister's gender reveal turned into an interrogation about why I wasn't drinking. I'm a 28-year-old female and was recently diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. Thankfully, it was caught early and my doctors are optimistic. The plan is surgery followed by chemotherapy, and they've told me that with treatment I should be okay. It's terrifying but manageable. One of the first instructions I was given was to avoid alcohol once treatment begins because of the medications and the strain it can put on the body. The diagnosis happened right before the holidays. My husband and I decided to hold off on telling my family until I officially started chemo. We wanted a little time to process it privately before it became everyone else's crisis. That meant attending holiday events and pretending everything was normal. Last weekend was my younger sister's gender reveal. She's pregnant with her first child and has been soaking up every ounce of attention. Despite being pregnant, she had alcohol at the party for guests. In my opinion, it's odd to center booze at an event celebrating pregnancy, but it's not my circus. I simply declined to drink. I wasn't the only one not drinking. A couple of elderly relatives stuck to soda, and of course my sister abstained. I didn't think much of it until one of her friends apparently noticed I hadn't touched alcohol all evening. That information somehow traveled directly to my sister. She approached me midway through the party and whispered, "Are you pregnant?" I told her no. She knows I'm child-free by choice and have been vocal about it for years. She frowned and asked again, like I might suddenly change my answer. "I'm not pregnant," I repeated. She crossed her arms and said, "If you're not pregnant, drink a beer right now and prove it." I blinked at her, stunned. "I don't owe you proof of anything," I said calmly. That's when she lost it. She started hissing that I was trying to ruin her reveal by showing up pregnant and stealing her attention. The irony of accusing me of pregnancy when I was battling cancer was almost laughable. But mostly it was exhausting. People nearby began turning their heads as her voice rose. Her husband rushed over, clearly trying to defuse the situation. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked. Then to me in a softer tone, "Are you pregnant?" By that point, I was fed up. I'd already said no twice. I was being publicly interrogated about my uterus at a party I hadn't even wanted to attend, so I snapped. "I have cancer," I said loudly. "That's why I'm not drinking." The room went silent in that way only a crowd can when a record scratches. My sister's face drained of color. Her husband started apologizing immediately. Guests shifted awkwardly, some staring at their shoes, others suddenly very interested in their drinks. Within minutes, the mood had completely shifted. A few relatives came over with wide eyes and soft voices offering condolences. I could already see the pity forming, the head tilts and sympathetic touches. My husband squeezed my hand and we decided to leave. The next day, my mother called me. Instead of asking how I was doing, she said, "You should have just had a drink. You ruined your sister's gender reveal." I was speechless for a second. "I ruined it?" I asked. "She demanded I drink to prove I wasn't pregnant." My mom doubled down. "You could have had one beer. No one would have known." That comment sat with me in a way I can't quite describe. In my family, alcohol is practically mandatory at gatherings. The only acceptable excuses for abstaining are being underage or being pregnant. Cancer apparently does not make the list. Cancer and alcoholism both run in my family. My mother's an alcoholic. My grandmother was. Several aunts and uncles drink excessively. One of the reasons I chose to be child-free is because I've watched generations struggle with addiction and illness, yet somehow I'm the villain for not performing a sip of beer to keep the peace. Some extended relatives and my sister's friends have claimed I did it for attention, that I could have just swallowed a drink and moved on. The fact that they think someone would invent or weaponize cancer for party drama says more about them than it does about me. My husband's furious. He's ready to skip the family Christmas gathering entirely, and I don't blame him. I'm tired. Tired of defending my choice not to drink. Tired of defending my choice not to have children. Tired of being told I should risk my health so someone else's party photos don't look awkward. The truth is, if my sister hadn't pushed, none of this would have happened. I was perfectly content sipping water in a corner and letting her have her moment. She's the one who turned my glass into a spectacle. She's the one who escalated a private question into a public confrontation. I don't think I did anything wrong. I didn't announce my diagnosis unprompted. I didn't stand on a chair and make a speech. I answered an accusation after being cornered. If that overshadowed the color of her confetti cannons, that's on her. Right now, my focus is on getting through surgery and chemo. I don't have the energy to manage other people's feelings about my illness. If someone thinks I should have poisoned myself with a drink to keep up appearances, they're welcome to toast on their own. I have bigger battles ahead than proving I'm not pregnant at a party. If avoiding a beer makes me the bad guy in my family's eyes, so be it. I'll take being sober and alive over being agreeable and sick any day. Honestly, your husband's reaction makes perfect sense. When someone you love is dealing with cancer, the last thing you expect is for their family to turn it into a social etiquette issue. His instincts to protect you from more of that stress isn't unreasonable at all. Surgery and chemotherapy are huge physical and emotional challenges, and you deserve to be surrounded by people who support you, not people arguing about whether you should have taken a symbolic sip of alcohol for optics. And our last story. Hey, HOA, can I use the pool? Nope. Hey, OP, you're in the HOA now. Nope. About 10 years ago, my wife and I packed up our city life and moved to the suburbs with the grand plan of raising our kids somewhere quieter. Good schools, tree-lined streets, cul-de-sacs full of bikes and chalk drawings, the whole postcard package. One of the selling points in the neighborhood was a community pool tucked behind a neat little fence at the end of the street. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well-maintained, and we figured it would be perfect during the brutal summer months. Shortly after we moved in, I reached out to the Homeowners Association to ask about joining so we could use the pool. I assumed it was automatic, or at least straightforward. Instead, I was told quite flatly that they were not accepting new members. No explanation, no wait list, just a polite but firm no. I remember hanging up the phone thinking it was bizarre that a group funded by membership dues was turning away someone offering to pay them. They turned away your money, said no new members, fine, but they spent years trying to control you anyway. You can't have it both ways. You don't get to keep someone out of the club and then act like they have to follow club rules. After that, life moved on. We got busy with work, school events, and figuring out our new routines. The pool became one of those things we meant to revisit but never did. 3 or 4 years passed, and honestly, I'd completely forgotten about that initial rejection. Around that time, my wife dove headfirst into gardening. What started as a few potted herbs turned into a genuine hobby. She read books, watched tutorials, experimented with different soil blends. The problem was that our backyard was almost entirely shaded by mature trees. After several failed attempts to coax vegetables to grow in the gloom, we decided to build a raised bed garden in the front yard where there was actual sunlight. Before we put a shovel in the ground, we did our homework. We checked city ordinances, zoning regulations, and anything else we could think of. There was no rule against front yard gardens, so I built her a sturdy raised bed and she transformed it into something straight out of a magazine. Berries, leafy greens, trellis tomatoes, colorful and meticulously maintained. Neighbors would slow down on walks to admire it, and the local kids loved sneaking a berry or two as they passed by. It was idyllic for about a month. Then the city inspector showed up. He said they'd received a complaint about our garden and needed to verify it complied with regulations. We walked him through everything, and he confirmed it was perfectly legal. A week later, he was back. Another complaint. Same conversation, same outcome. This became a pattern. Weekly visits. Each time we asked directly, is there anything we need to change? Is this illegal? And each time he reassured us it wasn't. Eventually, we realized someone was repeatedly reporting us anonymously, hoping the city would eventually find something wrong. What irritated me most wasn't the inspections themselves, it was the cowardice. Whoever had a problem with our garden lived close enough to see it daily, but couldn't be bothered to knock on our door. After months of this nonsense, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request to find out who was making the complaints. If someone wanted a conversation, we were ready for one. After submitting that request, the inspector visit stopped. Completely. The city never responded to my request, but the anonymous reports vanished overnight. For a brief moment, I thought that was the end of it. Then I received a phone call one afternoon from a number I didn't recognize. An older woman's voice greeted me in a tone that suggested she was about to deliver terrible news. "Hello," she began. "I'm sorry to tell you that you're going to have to remove your front yard garden." I paused. "Who is this?" "That doesn't matter," she replied briskly. "You need to remove it right away." "If you expect me to take that seriously, it absolutely does matter," I said. "The garden's not violating any city law or regulation. Unless you can provide something more concrete, it's not going anywhere." "It's against HOA rules," she snapped. "You cannot have a front yard garden in this area per the HOA." That's when it clicked. The same HOA that had declined my offer to join years ago, the same group that insisted they weren't accepting new members. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "That's interesting," I said calmly, "because when we moved in, I contacted the HOA to join. I was told you weren't accepting new members. Since I'm not a member, your rules don't apply to me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost picture her flipping through mental paperwork trying to find a loophole that didn't exist. That doesn't change the standards of the neighborhood," she stammered. "It actually does," I replied. "You had the opportunity to collect my dues and make me subject to your rules. You declined. So unless you can point me to a city ordinance, the garden stays." The call ended shortly after that with no resolution in her favor. Over the years, our garden has only grown. We've added more beds, more varieties, and even a couple of small playhouses for the kids near the front. It's become something of a neighborhood landmark. People stop to chat about tomatoes instead of complain about them. Sometimes I wonder if that phone call was the same person who made all those anonymous reports. I'll never know for sure. What I do know is that turning down free money to enforce rules backfired spectacularly. If you don't want someone in your club, you don't get to boss them around later. The pool still sits at the end of the street. We never joined, and we never needed to. We got fresh strawberries and sun-warmed tomatoes instead. That seems like a better deal anyway. First story. The cousin treated OP's flat like a free hotel. Itemized bills down to the penny, and left with half the groceries. OP's fiance solved it with hotel links, no debate, no guilt, just options. She's probably still staring at them. Second story. The sister turned a cancer diagnosis into a party foul. She demanded OP drink to prove she wasn't pregnant. The truth came out after being cornered. OP became the villain. Their mother said OP should have just had a beer. Cancer doesn't excuse you from performing normalcy. And the last story. The HOA rejected OP's dues, then spent years trying to control them anyway. Anonymous complaints, weekly inspections, intimidation calls. They wanted authority without contribution. The garden grew, the pool stayed empty. They got nothing. Story 2 hits the hardest. Cancer's real. Families should be safe. OPs cared more about optics than their health. Which one gutted you? Drop your vote in the comments. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.